Hello, good evening. Welcome to UPfront. My name is Raymond Akwa. Tonight, President Akufo-Addo on Sunday advised Ghanaians to rise above partisan considerations, set the record straight, and recognize the collective efforts in gaining our freedom as a state and independence from colonial rule, and do right by our history. When he made this particular statement, we took up the challenge of actually trying to do what he just said. Set aside the politicians and maybe the social commentators, the very tainted people, and get you Ghana's true and undiluted history by setting the record straight. My guest today to speak to that particular issue, I'll introduce him after this break. You welcome back. This is UPfront. My name is Raymond Akwa. My guest today, let me even put it this way. Every single generation has this kind of historian. So Professor Albert Dubois and his colleagues ran that particular generation. I'm sure you do recall. After them, the Irene Odotes, the Professor Adofenis, and the Finns also occupied a certain period. Now, this generation has a historian you should know about. His name is Kweku Dakuankra. He's an extraordinary man with a proper appreciation of Ghana's history. You're welcome, sir, to UPfront.
Thank you.
I hope you are doing well this day.
I'm doing very well.
Now, it's a challenge that was thrown to many because we like going back and forth on this same issue to do with what is the truest account of our history. I have to ask you this question because sometimes people don't believe that there can ever be. They think people are tainted politically, people are tainted ideologically, so it would obviously influence their thinking and what they consider to be the true account. Can we ever have a true, undiluted account of our history?
Yeah, I believe so. I believe so because the records are there. Whatever happened were recorded because we wouldn't say the events that leads to Ghana's independence was the time where written tradition had come to stay. In fact, by 1873, we had the first Gold Coast newspaper, which was operating, okay? And the Gold Coast colony itself was founded in 1874. So when we talk about Ghana's political history, we are talking about the history, which is a series of events that started from 1874, from the very period Gold Coast became a British territory up to the period we gained independence in 1957. And within all this period, from 1874 to 1957, there was a written tradition. So events that unfolded were recorded.
Now, I want us to take our time and go through this in a much more consistent format. So you think that there can be an ambiguous, clear, very, very succinct history that is not tainted by partisanship and all the other things involved?
Absolutely. If you look at the partisan aspect of the political history, it started from the 1947 aspect, where UGCC came into the scene, okay? And then subsequent emergence of the CPP from the belly of UGCC in 1949, okay? So the emergence of CPP and the UGCC led to this political dichotomy and the desire to say, who among these two political traditions best qualifies to, quote unquote, be a founder and founders of this country. So there is no politics post 1874 up to 1947.
I see.
Are you getting the point? So pre-1947, there is no tainted politicization of the history. The politicization starts from 47 to 57.
Now, let me get this straight. So, run us through what really happened from the time we were colonized officially by the British.
Okay, so what happened is that Gold Coast as a colony became part of the British territory, or the then southern part of Ghana, which is from area between Axim, okay, the Nzima area through all the part of central region, through Asan and other areas, through Achem to Aflao. That means Accra, Ada, and all those people were involved. That is what is called Gold Coast colony. original.
Okay, it's interesting that
in
you
1874.
didn't put in the Northern Territory there.
Yeah, there's no Northern Territory.
There wasn't any Northern Territory at the time.
So after that time, while we became a Gold Coast colony, the southern sector was Gold Coast colony. As I've mentioned, you did not hear about Ashanti too.
Yeah.
Ashanti too was not part of it. Then there was also the area from Ho up to Pando areas. Then through Ketekrache, through part of Dagomba land, part of Gonja land, part of Mamprisi land, and part of Boku were also not part of Gold Coast.
Okay.
I get in the point. Okay. So we have that small southern corridor, which is called Gold Coast Colony, which became part of the Gold Coast in 1874. Then from that time, a series of treaties were signed between some of the ethnic groups to join the Gold Coast Colony. So by 1898, indeed, some part of Kowu areas and what have you have also become part of the Gold Coast Colony.
Eastern region.
That's the current Eastern region. They have also become part of Gold Coast Colony. Then in 1897, thereabout, the George Ekin Ferguson was sent for expedition into the Northern Territory from 1895. And when he went, they was able to sign series of treaties with the Northern chiefs, and he was able to get them for the Gold Coast. I get in the point. And so the Northern Territories also became part of the Gold Coast Colony. So by 1901, the Northern Territory were part of the Gold Coast Colony.
I get you.
Then the Ashantis were the last remaining one there. So they were not ready to sign any treaty. So this led to the Yasantua War of 1900, which is the Anglo-Ashanti War of 1900. And in that war, Ashantis were defeated. And when they were defeated in that war, in 1902, they became part of the Gold Coast Colony, but administered differently from the Gold Coast Colony.
Okay, that's an interesting development. But now, you've actually run us through the original Gold Coast Colony, which other divisions became part of it along the line and all of that. Were there struggles for independence even as of that time?
No, in the early stages, no. What happened was that some people were not ready to join. So they rebelled against the British authorities. So they had to be bombed. For example, Elmina rebelled against their inclusion into the colony. And some Fanti chiefs were even against that. So Elmina town, we know today, is a new town. The old Elmina township was bombed down. Then Accra to under Kentucky area, he was also resistant against that. So Accra to around Osu was also bombed. So some of them were bombed apparently to force them to be part of the British colony of Gold Coast.
I see. So did it force them to doing anything different from what was supposed to be done? Were they worried by that particular trend of activity?
You mean the British authorities?
Yes.
Of course they were, but after defeating it, that's why they use military expeditions to deal with these issues.
Now, we would, in the course of this conversation, transition to bring you some live specific statements from a book launch that's on Ghana's history too, which you should be interested in the throes of our conversation. Yes, of course. I mean, we will bring you in the course of our conversation. I just want you to know that we will lace it with this so that you have a better appreciation of Ghana's history. Now, you've drawn in how. So at what point in time did the Northern Territory join after the UGCC was formed?
Yeah, of course. But before I do that, we need to know, when we talk about Ghana's independence history, historians divide it into three epochs. Okay. The first one is called cultural or plaintive nationalism. Then we have protest or proto-nationalism. Then we have the radical nationalism. The cultural or plaintive nationalism is the period from 1874 up to 1897. Okay? And the protest nationalism or the proto-nationalism also starts from 1897 up to 1947. Then from 1947 to 1957 is the radical nationalism. And within these political epochs were certain individuals who performed certain roles with the view of trying to get self-rule for Ghana or Gold Coast.
Okay, let's start from the very first one.
So when we talk about the plaintive or cultural nationalism, it's about the individual who originally were social formations or what you call ethnic formations, who have now been brought under one political or geographical entity called Gold Coast Colony.
Okay.
So they need to form their own identity as a people. Identity as a Fanti, identity as a Ga is known. Now the identity as Gold Coasters was very important because either two they were living apart. Okay. So the cultural alternative nationalism was an opportunity for them to carve a new niche as a Gold Coasters.
Build which some sort of a nation state.
Very good.
Identify not only as their ethnic affinities, but also now of the state, the new state that's being formed.
Which is called the Gold Coast. So they became the Gold Coasters. And so they need a new modalities, a way of thinking, a way of dressing, and so on, so that they can use it to identify each individual within that geopolitical entity. Are you getting the point?
I get your point.
So what happened was that now there's the need to get back into our Africanness. Okay, so you see the Fantis who were bearing names like, let's say, Anamwa for Anaman. They changed their name from Anaman back to Anamwa. If he is called Essien, he changed his name back to Insia. Okay, if he is called Waters, he changed his name back to Ayensu, and so on. These were the period of cultural nationalism. People like SRB Solomon or Atauma or JB Anaman, Kesley Hayford and Co., John Mesa Saba and others, when they form organizations like Fanti National Society, which is Fanti Amembu Feku, which became Gone Fanti Movement, what they decided to do is that even in church going, you were no longer going to wear coats and think everything like an European. So they start to wear their African clothes. They begin to wear their African sandals. In the church, they introduce playing of atompan and local drums, dono, and so on. Hitherto, they were only dealing with organs and European things. So these were people who were in the awareness of trying to create a succinct value system within their cultural formation.
No, but that's interesting. So who are the leading figures in these times? I mean, were they influenced by their own people, or they had to learn this new cultural detail, even though they're going back to their own history from outsiders?
No, some of them were writers, so they started writing books. Someone like J.B. Anaman had, by 1895, written Gold Coast Guide. And some of these things, they were teaching their people about their own cultural value and things African, because they need to think and behave like Africans and Gold Coasters.
Now, I will take leave of you for a second. We'll continue with this conversation. But for now, I'm taking you to this wonderful conversation I told you about, where Ghana's history is also being put in the right perspective from different, what they call it, thinking and different appreciations. You can now take you to that particular book launch where you get to appreciate Professor Kojo Yanka, that particular educationist and historian, giving us some more appreciation of what he considers to be From Jamestown to Jamestown, Letter to an African Child. His book, his statements on it. You can listen to him now.
In Accra here, we had the Egyptian pharaohs had kingdoms, and the big pyramids of Egypt were built at that time, long before the Greeks and the Romans came. The Ghana Empire, the Mali Empire, the Songhai Empire, empires which boasted of scientific and technological skills, from where Western philosophers took their lessons. So where were the ancient kingdoms of the Zulus, the Ashantis, the Kabakas, and the Congos before the white man came? As if they were not in existence. So, dear friends, some 25 years ago, I was invited to the 375th anniversary of the arrival of the first 20 Africans on the soil of America, on the shores of Fort Monroe near Jamestown. It's Jamestown where they settled, Jamestown, Virginia. As I sat through a symposium at the nearby Hampton University, and the history of Jamestown, Virginia was being narrated and discussed, something occurred to me to start searching for a link between that Jamestown and this Jamestown in Ghana. Since then, I have visited Jamestown, Virginia more than 5 times. I have watched videos. I've interviewed people, I've visited various museums in America and elsewhere. I have bought and read over 100 books, and I've pieced together a lot of information. Of course, when I started frequenting Jamestown Cafe here, near, how you call it what? Ashertown, right? It doesn't matter. I met historians like Nehemiah Tefio, is he here? His picture is in my book. And progressive people like Ladi Nylander, with whom I shared my intentions. I got more encouraged by what I heard. I could have produced a 400-page book very easily, but then I was conscious of my target group, those who can read and get the information and make use of the information. So I thought to limit the story to just over 230 pages. I can do 3 more editions and add some more information. It was through my research and interactions that I found that James Fort used to be a slave trading post. With all my school, I didn't even know. So between those 230 pages, Jamestown represents all the forts and castles through which the Atlantic slave trade was carried out. Cape Coast, Elmina castles, and all the castles that Ladi mentioned have been known. They are all hugely popular for slave trade and other purposes, but Jamestown is relatively unknown. My book, From Jamestown to Jamestown, Letters to an African Child, is dedicated, among others, to people that I related with along the line, those who invited me to Jamestown in 1994, the founder of Panafest, Dr. Effa Sutherland, her daughter, Dr. A.C. Sutherland, Mr. Akunu Dake, who really were the founding members of the Panafest movement, Rabbi Kohen Halevi, Professor James Small, and Dr. Lionel Jeffries, for deep insights we shared together as members of the International Board of Panafest. The descendants started arriving in Ghana in numbers during the Panafest movement. But this is a special year. Our major theme for Panafest at that time was the rebirth of African civilization, with the sub-theme uniting the African family. It is important that we always emphasize reuniting the African family. And I think that the Year of Return should also emphasize it. They are not just coming as tourists. They are coming on a spiritual journey to reunite with their people. For 25 years, despite all the challenges the Panafest movement faced and surmounted, I have been inspired and motivated on each occasion in my public and private life by the depth and impact that the Panafest made on my worldview and vision. Definitely, my mindset was well and properly glued by the Pan-Africanist vision that one day the dream of our Pan-African ancestors, Marcus Garvey, W.B. Du Bois, Sylvester Williams, George Padmore, Kwame Nkrumah, Jomo Kenyatta, and all the many more, would be realized. My research showed that the first 20-plus captives to settle in Jamestown, Virginia, from Africa, were shipped out of Luanda, Angola. At the time, King James I had come to power. And King James I at that time, before King James II, after whom Jamestown was named, this was the same King James, after whom one version of the Bible is named. He had 4 major pillars of his foreign policy. One was absolutism. When I speak, nobody speaks. When the king speaks, that was King James I. The second pillar was united and a centralized government. You know, he was not an English. He came from the Scots, so he united the English and the Welsh into a united kingdom. And his third important pillar of his foreign policy was colonization. Colonize, colonize, colonize. And then, of course, he had international peace and trade. When he meant international trade, he really meant it. Where were they getting the raw materials from? Where are the laborers coming from? What I have done in this book, therefore, is to select Jamestown, Ghana, to represent all the slave trading posts in all of Africa, from Angola all the way through to Senegal and across to East Africa. The methods of capture were the same. They changed people. The dungeons were of different sizes, but equally horrible. And the transatlantic journey was a nightmare. If you don't know how the transatlantic journey went, read this book. Africans on this continent were brutalized and economically raped, not just by the slave trade and colonialism, but by the carefully manipulated and deliberate destruction of their values and their culture, leading to a programmed shift of their mindsets through so-called Western education, religion, and civilization toward everything European. All those who left here, they made them drop their names. Those who were drumming and singing on the boats were asked to stop singing those primitive songs. When they got to the other side and they started drumming and dancing, they called the dancing voodoo and fetish. And we all accept it. On the other side of the Atlantic, Africans in the Americas and the Caribbean, preceded by others who had been shipped to the islands in South America, including Mexico. Mexicans were mostly blacks. They were equally brutalized and dehumanized and made to feel inferior to a superior race. If you read the book, you will see part of the Bible was taken out so that the slave masters could preach to the slaves that they didn't have any rights. Any part of the Bible which said that we were equal was taken out so that the blacks would not see that we are all equal. Today, the race question has raised itself again in America, and some of us are not surprised. The extreme whites are saying today that America does not belong to blacks, when it was the blacks who had to put the railway together in America, which is now uniting the whole of the United States of America. So where was this African civilization that Panafest and others were conscious of rebirthing? I went further back into the origin of man, the original world civilization, starting from the Nile River, from Egypt and Ethiopia, long before the Greeks and the Romans came. I dug into researched scientific, architectural, medical, and technological inventions and achievements that were deliberately destroyed and burnt by the Greeks and the Roman invaders, whose agenda was to erase the African civilization from the face of the earth. Today, there is evidence that black women who contributed to putting America on the moon were forgotten and left out of history. It is only a few months ago that they realized it and they were honored in America. Why did they leave their names out? It was deliberate. But history shows that Africans never gave up. The strong ones who survived the journey to America, they resisted, they rebelled, and they revolted everywhere they were treated like non-humans. The revolts in the so-called New World were brutal and focused. In Trinidad, Tobago, in Jamaica, in Guyana, all the history show, and there's one interesting country, Guyana, probably they took the name from Ghana, where the leader of the rebels was a Ghanaian, and his name is now is in their museum, and it is created a statue in the middle of the city. It's when you do not know that you think that Africans didn't do anything. And few of us know. And when I say few of us, I know few of us on this continent know that the American Civil War we have heard about or not, Africans should be considered as equal to whites in America. That is what gave rise to the Civil War. There's more to read. And when you finish reading the book, I tell you a second edition will come. Meanwhile, African intellectuals and trade unionists from the continent and the diaspora were united at some point in the Pan-Africanist Congresses. And the last of the Congresses was held in 1945 in Manchester, where they all agreed on strategies to fight for equal rights and social justice. Nnamdi Azikiwe of Nigeria was there. Jomo Kenyatta of Kenya was there. Kwame Nkrumah of the Gold Coast was there. In fact, J.B. Dankwa was also there. Akwon Ejeyi was also there. They were all empowered to come back to Africa to lead the nationalist agitations. Those in the Americas initiated the formation of civil rights movements, which led to Martin Luther King leading the various marches. He was not the only one. There were many of them, but he became the prominent one to lead the various marches to Washington that led to the enactment of a lot of acts to give blacks equal rights. It is.
So you're actually listening to Professor Kwesi Kojo-Yankah. Of course, the brother is actually Kwesi Yankah. And Kojo-Yankah is actually the founder of AUCC. It's that wonderful book, From Jamestown to Jamestown, Letters to an African Child. That's actually what he is talking about. And eventually giving the blurb of the book and talking about, and this book, let's be clear, is on the pre-colonial history and colonial history of Ghana, its significance for Pan-Africanism. Of course, this is also the year of return, so it fits in quite well. But here in studio, our conversation is on our political history, post-colonial political history. And what we did prior to going to hear from Kojo-Yankah was to put it in the categories it belongs. So first, the grouping had to form a social unit that was Gold Coast and be identified as Gold Coasters. And Kweku is still with us here. Kweku Dakolanka is a historian from the University of Ghana. He's still with us here on this particular matter. So I want us to continue on that particular path, where we now move to the next section.
So we now into the next section, which is the protest nationalism.
Okay.
So in 1894, the governor came out, Maxwell, came out with a new measure. And the measure is that every available land in the Gold Coast, which is not occupied by human being, belongs to the Queen of England. Because in the colonial legal principle, there's something called Nelius Terris, which is a thing without owner.
Ternalis.
Yes, okay. A thing without owner. So if there is something that has no owner, it is assumed that it belongs to the Queen. So that's what happened. And then they came out of the land of 1894. the Gold Coasters came together, and then they write series of letters to the governor to change his mind, because in Africa, if you see a land that is not occupied, it doesn't mean it has no owner.
Yeah.
So when the governor refused to budge, what they did was that they formed a new organization in 1897 called Aborigines Right Protection Society. And this society was made up of the Gold Coast intellectuals like J.E. Hayford, John Mensah Saba, J.P. Brown, E.J.P. Brown, and several others, including J.E. Baini and others. Edmund Bennerman and others were there, John Hatton Brew. There were so many Gold Coast intellectuals who were there, including the first Gold Coast medical doctor, Dr. Kote Papafield.
Okay.
All of them were in this organization. So they came together and then they wrote a series of letters and reforms which they need to dispatch to England to go and argue at the colonial office. And what happened was that they needed money. So a man called Jacob Wilson Say, if you heard the name, it's a fancy man called Kwabwenyi. He used his own money, purchased a ship for the delegation, and they left Ghana to England, where they went to the British House of Lords to go and argue about the Aborigines' right to their own land. And they were successful, and they won their case in the British House of Lords.
I see.
And then, as a result of that win, it gives opportunity for the entire west coast of Africa to be free from what befell the Central, Eastern, and Southern Africa, where the Europeans were able to appropriate the rights in the land in those countries. So as you see, the Kenyans have to fight an insurrection called the Mau Mau insurrection before they were able to grab their land. The situation in Zimbabwe, they also have to fight. Even after independence, they have to seize the land back from the white people so that the Africans will get. In South Africa, the same thing. But because of what the Gold Coasters did in 1897, by going to England to fight in the British courts to win the case, the Aborigines Right Protection Society, they did not only succeed to save the lands of Gold Coast alone, but the entire West Africa. And that is very remarkable feat in the political history of this country. So some historians even say that that was the first independence for Ghana, the right to have your land.
And this which year was this specifically?
This is in 1897.
Okay.
1897. That is where this thing happened. And so Aborigines Reputation operated from that time as the sole political pressure group within the Gold Coast. And then in 1910, the British came back again and said, with what is called the Crown Forest Land Bill, Crown Forest Bill. And this bill says that any forest which is also unoccupied, it must also belong to the Queen of England. Here again, our Aborigines Right Protection Society sent their delegation to England, and they won their case again. And all the forest protection in the Gold Coast came back to their rightful owners, which is the Gold Coasters. So that is the kind of work the ARPS, or Aborigines Right Protection Society, continue to fight against every colonial obnoxious measure that affected the people. Then out of the belly of the ARPS emerged an idea that if we want to achieve independence for Ghana, it could not only come from within Ghana alone, but there must be a West African approach. So J.E. Hayford, who has a Pan-Africanism consciousness, decided to found National Congress for British West Africa. And so this organization was drawing its powers from Nigeria, Sierra Leone, the Gambia, and the Gold Coast, who were the 4 British territories in West Africa. So they came together, and then in 1919, they found the organization in Accra here, and then its membership decided to fight for the right of African representation into the Legislative Council. In those days, only chiefs were appointed to the Legislative Council, which is now what we will call Parliament. And in those days, only chiefs and some few selected African intellectuals that are in bed with the colonial authorities were appointed so that they can do the European bidding. Because if you go and appoint some of these opponents who are anti-colonial, they will come in and then they will cause a lot of havoc. Yeah. So that was what was happening. And this organization, NCBWA, decided to fight for the right of representation for the intellectual Africans to be the representative of the African people in the Legislative Council.
And not just the chiefs.
Not just the chiefs, whom they see as being in cahoot with the British, because mind you, under the indirect rule, the British were ruling
through the chiefs.
So the chiefs were joint trustees, okay? And these people don't want that because it was stampeding the fight for against colonialism. So within that moment, a gunman also came out with a new political party. It's called A.W. Kojo Thompson, the man who is named after Kojo Thompson Road.
Okay. He
came out with a party called Gunman B Party. And his argument is that if there's going to be a representation under the Municipal Corporation Bill of 1924, if that bill, which is going to give right for intellectuals to be appointed, to be elected into the Legislative Council ought to be there, then they must reduce the property rate. In those days, you can only vote when you are a property owner.
I see.
So the election was not universal after suffrage that we have now. Yeah, so you need to have be a ratepayer. So he wanted it to be reduced so that more people will have access into the electoral system. Okay, so he also brought his own. Within that same moment in Accra, they formed a party called Accra Ratepayers Association. And
that's a political party.
It's a political pressure group.
Okay.
Just like the NCBWA and the ARPS.
During those times.
Yeah. So the Ratepayers Association was founded by a man called Dr. Frederick Nanka Bruce. History tells us that he's the most best dressed man in the entire Gold Coast.
I see.
Yeah, he played golf with the governor and he was a stylish man. So Nanka Bruce formed this political organization with a man called Akela Pasoya. And then
not Akela Pasoya now.
No, that is his descendants. Akela Pasoya, you know, yeah. So Akela Pasoya and a man called John Glover Addo. He was also in the party, as well as E.C. Quest, who later became the first speaker of Ghana Parliament. As you know, so the speaker's place is E.C. Quest. So they were all in the political party and with Kote Papafiu and others. So these parties came together. So by 1934, there were various political pressure groups. And what they were doing within those times were sending petitions to England. Whatever piece of legislation or a measure which is quite obnoxious to the interest of the African people, they press home to the colonial office in England and ensure that that measure is dealt with. So in 1934, for example, we saw the first time that the educated people, as well as the traditional authorities, who were then have a committee called Joint Provincial Council of Chiefs, came together to send a delegation to England when the governor introduced what is called Water Rate Bill in 1934, as well as the Sedition Bill. The Sedition Bill has been introduced because the period was experiencing radical nationalism in the Gold Coast, which is unknown. The journalists have become very, very radical, and they were attacking the governor as well as the colonial authority.
So that's where the law on sedition.
That is where the law of sedition was passed for the first time to deal with the journalists as well as some of the Africans who write very critical articles. And this was also because a man like Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe had come to Gold, the Nigerian. He was here and was editing a newspaper called African Morning Post with a man called I.T.A. Willis Johnson from Sierra Leone, who was a trade unionist and a communist. So they brought what you call radicalism into the journalism landscape in Gold Coast. And it was very difficult for the British to handle them. Okay. And they were also operating within the edges of Gamambi Party. Okay? And then Gamambi Party was a mass party of the Kojo Thompson's party. And then at that time, too, the elite party was RPEA, the Ratepayers Association. And the British didn't want that. So they have to find a way of even deporting Nnamdi Azikiwe back to Nigeria. I see. As well as the I.T.A. Willis Johnson. So these people in 1934 sent a delegation to England to go and fight against the Accra Water Rate as well as the Sedition Bill. Unfortunately, they lost the case. So these were the political people who were fighting within the space of 1897 to 1947. Then it reached a stage where Dankwa sat down and realized that from the way things are going, something ought to be done. And this is because in 1942...
And this is Joseph Boachi Kwame
Dankwa. Yes.
And JP Dankwa, as we know
very good. Yeah. Because from 1920s up to 1930s, Dankwa organized a series of conferences in Gold Coast for the educated elites. And it was called Gold Coast Youth Conferences. And within the conferences, a new crop of African or Gold Coast intellectuals emerged. And he realized that these are people that he can harness to come together and use for nationalism causes. Okay. So in 1942, he brought all the conferences, the ideas that they had together into a book, which was a 400-page book. And then he called Sir Akukosa to come and chair it so that they can formulate a new constitutional reform for the governor at the time.
And these things all were done by Joseph Boachi Dankwa.
Yes, that was
alone or in concert with other people.
He did it in concert with other people. So when you read the Gold Coast Youth Conference, we have Ateku Brakatu and others. Sir Akukosa, you have EC Quest. In fact, his own was not a political organization. It was bringing all the Gold Coast intelligentsia, irrespective of your political affiliation. Okay, so all of them came together and they put their thoughts together at various conferences that was organized from 1928 at Achimota until 1937, going up to 1940. These were series of conferences.
I see.
So when after Akukosa's constitutional reform, they gave the document to the British Colonial Secretary Oliver Stanley that this is what they want to be incorporated into the Gold Coast Constitution. So it was given to Alan Barnes, and then Alan Barnes looked at it, and he came out with his 1946 Constitution. Alan Barnes with the Barnes Constitution. So that is what happened within the period. But the executives that Dankwa was looking at, that the African members will have proper ministerial rule, they just make them ex-official members of the Governor's Executive Council, which means they make them very weak. So as a result, Dankwa traveled to, decided that he wants to form a party. He went to Second C. Park Grant, who was the old man and has a lot of money, and then talked to R.S. Blay and others. Then the idea of forming a new political organization was realized.
Different from the Gamambi party.
Different from
the Rent
Association and all of yes. Them. So they founded this political platform across the board. And the interesting thing was that in 1946, per Alan Barnes Constitution, Ashanti for the first time joined Gold Coast as in the legislative union.
I see.
You get the point. So when UGCC was going to be founded, now we have Ashanti as being part of Gold Coast.
Gold Coast.
So in Sopon on August 4th, 1947, United Gold Coast Convention was founded at a Kenyan Lodge, which was owned by Mr. Abion Mens. Okay.
At that time, let's be clear, there was no sign of Nkrumah in all of this.
Yeah. Most history books at the time, you don't hear Nkrumah. But then Gold Coast leader of 1947, okay, August, which August 12th.
Is it a book or a newspaper?
It's a newspaper, Gold Coast leader. In the reporter writing from Salt Pond says that, and then at the meeting, the Graf Johnson brought a note and said, a Gold Coaster, one of our own, who support our cause in the UK, by name Francis Inria Nkrumah, also sent his felicitation for the inauguration of this new organization. So Nkrumah sent a note, and which was read at Salt Pond.
At the formation of the
UGCC. This is their information. It's there in the Gold Coast leader of 1947.
But does that make me a member of the...
No, what I'm trying to say is that when it means he knew about the organization towards the formation.
It's one thing that you stuck out in all of this. Yeah. You have mentioned Joseph Boachi Dankwa consistently putting the youth groups together, organizing conferences.
Of course, because when J.E. Hayford died in 1930, at the Legislative Council, Akukosa took his seat in the Legislative Council as one of the high voice within the Legislative Council. But outside the Legislative Council, Dankwa inherited J.E. Hayford's political role in Gold Coast.
In galvanizing the people.
Yes, in galvanizing the people. And he did it so well within the organization of JCYC and others, which culminated in the United Gold Coast Convention, which are a series of leaders from across the colony at the time, except people of the Northern Territories have then not joined the Gold Coast colony, so they were not part of it. So from 47, the new political entity was given birth to. And at the meeting...
And this 47 is the 4th August thing that we're talking about.
Yeah, that's the 4th August.
It is one of the reasons why we recently had our Founders Day.
That is why some political tradition find it erroneous that it is happening on the very same day a political tradition was born. I get to the point.
Okay.
So the 4th August thing happened, and then they came out with their new motto, which is self-government within the shortest possible time.
So that motto came out first?
Yes, it came when the party, the organization
when the UGCC was officially formed. Okay, I see.
So they gave out. So within that meeting, a man asked, what does the self-government within shortest possible time mean?
What does the short mean in this case?
Yeah, in this case. So the Graf Johnson was the general secretary, said, it depends upon the organization and the preparedness of the Gold Coast people to undo the colonial system.
Okay.
So the self-government can mean 10 years, it can mean 5 years, it can mean 2 years, it can even mean 3 months.
I see.
If we are able to galvanize ourselves and then dismantle the colonial structures.
Purely based on preparedness.
Preparedness.
Okay.
And so that is why they put it that way. And that was the explanation given to the member.
Not because they wanted to take a longer time to gain independence.
From the answer given by the Graf Johnson, I will take the Graf Johnson's explanation because this was the time that we are having a political party which was drawing its membership, not from the Gold Coast proper, but from the Ashanti territories too.
I see.
I get in that point.
I get you.
So it makes it a mass party of a sort, which was different from the others. Secondly, it was the first political party which came out openly to express self-government now. Because if you use the word self-government, it will land you in prison and whatever. But for the first time, some group of people have come and they were talking about self-rule. And that is very important point.
Now, the contention, which is often even abroad with the day, August 4, which we celebrate as Founders Day.
So let me cut this to make the story complete.
Yeah.
So later, the party was running slow. The organization, the way they wanted to go was not happening because most of them were workers in the colonial administration.
Okay.
So Akwanje suggested bringing Nkrumah, who was then in the UK, to come and take the job. Because Nkrumah was unemployed there and you know about his plight. So the organization came together, contributed money, and then they brought Nkrumah in. Truly, when Nkrumah came in, he came with radicalism. As it is, Nkrumah has experienced the Calabar system discrimination in US when he was a student there. And when he came to UK, he was also a member of the Pan-African system, and he was deeply involved in the organization of 5th Pan-African Conference at Manchester, which is called the Manchester Conference. So he had acquired huge experience in organization of political activities. So when he came, he brought that experience and put it within the UGCC, and he energized the then conservative UGCC to become very radical. So if you look at the Watson Commission report, from the few membership of about 10 to 15, he moved it to over 60 and others. So Nkrumah brought that radicalism. Then the issue of the positive action, the differences in ideology, and how to move the party forward led to the split between Nkrumah and the members of the UGCC. And as a result, in 1949, he formed the CPP. Okay?
That's just 2 years after the formation of the UGCC.
You say?
2 years after the formation
so
of the UGCC.
CPP apparently was born out of the UGCC. You get a point. So, per the Kusa constitutional reforms of 1948, parameters were rolled out that by 51, there's going to be election. Mind you, Alabama's constitution failed. That's why some people argue that it was dead at birth, okay? Because it did not foresee bringing the Northern Territories into the scheme of things within the Gold Coast politics. So the Constitutional Committee brought that idea that the Northern Territories will form part of the Gold Coast Territory in the next election, which was slated for 1951.
I get you.
So in 1951, Ghana Gold Coast went to polls. And then there were 3 political parties that went to polls. We have the CPP, which was then led by Nkrumah. you have the UGCC led by Dr. J.B. Dankwa, and then you have National Democratic Party, NDP, and their popular name was Domos. Domos, they were people from Accra, highly intellectual people like Niama Olenu, Kofi Edumwa Bosman. Then you have, their leader was Dr. Frederick Nanka Bruce. So they went to election, and then CPP won that election in 51. And then Dankwa came second, and then Nanka Bruce came third. So from 52, when the next Legislative Council, which has now become Legislative Assembly, was opened, Nkrumah became the leader of the government business because his party won the elections.
In 51.
So, very good. So from 52 to 54, Nkrumah became the prime minister as well as the leader of government business. Then in 54, another election was organized. This time around, the UGCC was fragmented. It's divided into three. Okay? So out of UGCC, we have Ghana Congress Party, which was led by Dr. K.A. Buzia. Then we have Ghana National Party, which was led by Emmanuel Odakwe Obechebelamte. Okay? That is Jake's father, who also led the NDP. Then you have Dr. Kumi Ansakwe, who also have his party, Ghana Action Party, all out of the belly of UGCC. Then there was also a Muslim Association Party, which was founded by Alhaji Ahmedu Baba, Alhaji Lalami, and others from Kumasi, and then all the Zonkos in Ghana also came together. And their leader, they also came out of a fragment who was a man called Kwekuba Nkoli Awana Rena, who was the first trained journalist in Gold Coast, Dr. Kwekuba Nkoli Awana Rena. So because he wants to lead the Muslim party, he had to also convert to become a Muslim. So he changed his name to Mustafa Rena. Then he also led that party. Then we have a party called Awon Youth Association, which is led by Modesto Apalu. Okay? He also have his party. And so all these parties came together and contested the 1954 election. And Nkrumah again won in the 54 election. Then there was a last election before we go to independence, which is 1956. Then a critical question of what we will use to, govern the country, whether a unitary form of government or federal system. So in Ashanti region,
whether the Ghanaian current system or the Nigerian system.
Yes. So what happened was from Ashanti territory was birthed a political organization. Lest I forget, in 1954, there was also a Northern People's Party, which had S.D. Dombo as a head. Okay. Because in 51, the Northern Territories represented as just members of the territories. These members in 54 came together and founded the Northern People's Party. Are you getting the point? So in 56, Ashanti had a new party. And that party was National Liberation Movement.
Bafa Kotosuwa.
Bafa Kotosuwa.
Okay, I get
which
you.
almost all the members of the Ghana Congress Party, Ghana National Party, Ghana Action Party, all went to join. Okay? All went to join the NLM.
Because I'm wrapping up on this particular night, and I don't want to cut it short. The question is whether or not we can still continue with our funders as it's supposed to be today, or we have to single out Nkrumah for his extraordinary contribution.
I think Nkrumah had already been singled out. Because when we talk about the birthday, no single individual in this country had that glorious honor. Nkrumah alone had that honor. That alone shows you that he is a primus inter pares, the first among equal. Among the pack, everybody contributed, but Nkrumah's role, as it can be seen, he emerged the leader. But what the president has done with the founders is opening a window of opportunity to also talk about the contribution of other nationalists who contributed in various ways, including the role of the women.
Okay, I get your point.
In this regard.
Well, I want to thank you. I'm sure we should do this once again. Kwekuda Akwankra is a historian, and this, folks, is where we end today's edition of UPfront. Many thanks to you for watching.